Hey there, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this last session of mine for this using Qualtrax creatively for a culture of compliance, which is a mouthful. I actually didn't realize what I had written before I submitted that, and yeah, it's a lot to handle. I did want to talk briefly though. You'll see I've got Susie Bowen here, my better counterpart. When we originally made this session, we kind of had this vision for how the whole thing would run. And we wanted it to be very collaborative. We wanted it to be a place where we could all kind of come together and chat and talk through ideas. That got messed up by me because I can't figure out how to use Teams correctly. And so I messed up all of the invites, and we had to kind of pivot last minute. So we're doing the best we can with this, but I think we've got a pretty good hold with it on how we want it to move forward. What that means for you guys is we're not going to be able to have you unmute your mics or collaborate with us while we're talking. And I know you're probably sitting there thinking, that's all right, I didn't want to chat anyway. That's totally fine. We are big believers that this conference really works best when we're all kind of collaborating and you guys are allowed to talk with each other about what's working and what isn't. And so even though we can't vocally do that, I do want you guys to still have the ability to submit ideas and questions and feedback and chat with each other. So in Cvent on the right-hand side, you'll see the Q&A section and the chat section. As we're talking, if there are things you feel like you want to chat through or questions you have, please use that. We're really looking forward to kind of walking through this with you. The other thing I'm going to say is that I am going to approach this whole talk from a pretty high level of admin ability. And I don't want that to intimidate anyone. The real purpose for doing that is to try to get through as much content as I can. So if I'm showing something or if I'm talking about something and you just are completely lost or you're not sure what I'm referencing, ask as many questions as you want. I want to be able to answer the questions that you guys have. Okay, so nothing's off the table. Speak up and ask when you feel like you need that. All right, so the whole point of this session, as the name implies, is that we're going to be looking at creative ways to increase user adoption. I and Susie too, I think, and I hope I'm not speaking for her, we believe that the more people you have in a system working within it, even if it's not directly for quality tasks, the better that's going to improve your culture, the better your quality system is going to be overall. So most of our talk, or most of my talk, is going to be around that. Susie's going to be here to monitor all of your questions, all of the chat, and make sure that we're hitting on the right things. All right, so one of the biggest ways that I have always been an advocate for that we can try to increase adoption or get usage out of the system that we might not normally use it for is on the workflow side. And I'm going to pull up my Qualtrax system here now after that nice little PSA. There we go. There's a session later today that Tim Osborne is doing, who's with A2LA, on how to effectively prepare for and perform audits. Now, obviously, I can't tell you guys physically how to go out and perform an audit, right? That varies for a lot of different reasons, depending on what your compliance pressure is, or what kind of staff you have and all of that kind of stuff. But what I can do is try to make you guys think about maybe new ways to do audits within a Qualtrax system. And so we're going to start there with audits. And I'm speaking pretty broadly when I mention audit. So you could also think of what I'm going to talk about as far as like compliance checks, safety audits, any type of performance check that you might do. What I'm going to show you could be used in that same kind of vein as well. So the second, I guess, PSA I'll give is that I will be working entirely within the user conference site, that QUC 2021.qualtraxcloud.com. You should all have logins for that, and you can follow along with everything that I show you in that site. So if you want to see it or do it, by all means, go in there and have some fun. Okay, so we're going to start on the workflow side, and I'm going to start with just this audit management workflow. And this is going to be the basis of what we're going to talk about at the beginning. And if you're newer to Qualtrax, or if you might even be around for a while, but if you use an audit workflow, this is probably going to look pretty familiar. And it's essentially managing the process of the audit, right? So we've got preliminary audit details, planning and preparing for it, and then conducting that audit. In this piece right here, this conducting it, is where we want to spend some time today. Mostly, the big question that I always get when we talk about this workflow is, all right, and actually let me move us forward to that step so I can show you. Let me close that, and one of these. Move that forward, and we'll move it one more step. So we're just pretending here, and we're now at this conduct audit step, right? And when we get here, the biggest question I get has to do with this field. So audit notes, right? Audit checklist. How do I do this piece of it, right? And it's a really good question. And we've traditionally, if you would have asked Susie and I a long time ago, if you could do this in Qualtrax, if you could do notes and a checklist for an assessment within a workflow, we might have answered this in a very different way, right? It's a pretty complicated process. And I keep getting asked it enough that I thought, well, maybe we should actually dig into what it would look like to keep a checklist or to keep all of these notes within a workflow. And to do that, I thought the biggest win you would get is if you don't do it within the workflow itself, right? If we prepare a second workflow, kind of like this corrective action, that we can launch off a checklist and then have them complete that while you're managing the process with the main workflow, that would be a pretty cool way to do it. So let me go back to my inbox, and I'm going to launch this other workflow that's the audit management with the checklist. And essentially what I've done is I've kept all the fields the same. So we're just going to assign this to me and to Miss Susie Bowen, and just going to fill out the same fields that we had before. And what we've done is, instead of taking us through to prepare and conduct, we're actually going to we're going to assign a checklist out to them. And I have built a checklist workflow. And in this case, it's for 17025, ISO 17025. But again, you could use this for anything. Could be performance checks, could be a safety audit, could be really anything that you need to launch and have somebody complete. So I've got that workflow built separately. All I'm doing with the parent is assigning the owner of the checklist. Okay, and you'll see when we launch it, I can go give somebody one, come back here and assign another one, right? So we're just going in this loop as long as I need, giving everybody a checklist that needs one, and then proceeding on with conducting the audit, right? So the main workflow is going to proceed along its track, manage the process. My checklist will be what is the actual data, the evidence of compliance there. So when we get, well, let me just do that. So we get the checklist. I'm going to give one to Susie right there, and just go ahead and assign that to her. It's of course going to take me out of that workflow, right? It's got to run automation, launch the workflow, copy the data for me. So here in a sec, we'll just refresh. There we go. We've got the parent workflow back to me, and my new checklist launched out to Susie. And I'll show you in the design here in a second, but I've actually launched this to Susie and me so that I could keep it here and show you that. But you could imagine just her getting this instead of both of us. In the parent, I'm going to go give myself one too, right? So I'm just going to take her out of that field, add me in, and then launch another one. All right, and you can do that as many times as you need to give a checklist to everybody involved in that particular check that you're doing. And so I'll just give it a sec, refresh again, and now you've got parent workflow back, 2 checklists out there launched. Okay, so parent workflow, let's stay here for a sec. This one I'm done with, right? I don't need any more. I'm just going to keep it with Susie and me, Susie and I, whatever the correct English is there. I'm not an English person. And proceed on through to conduct that audit, right? So I'm just going to click this next route here, proceed with audit. That way, now we're ready to do it, and we're just going to prepare for findings at that point. And for this workflow, we wouldn't need this at all, right? All of our notes, all of the checklist is going to happen in that other workflow, which you'll see in a sec. Okay, the other cool thing is our history is going to be where all of this is found, right? I've got this workflow, the parent guiding all of my actions, but the evidence can be found pretty easily in these individual checklists given to those users. Okay, so back to my inbox. We'll ignore the parent workflow, and now we're going to go down to one of these checklists, and I'll load mine for right now. And you'll see that with the child workflow, I've got the main info from the parent copied down, some of it viewable only, some of it still editable. For instance, maybe I picked the wrong person and I want to reassign this. I could remove them, add the new user in, reassign that checklist over to somebody else because that's still editable. And then maybe I want to update some audit information, as I'm performing this as well. Now, the cool part is down here, and I have to admit, I've never really built a workflow like this before. This is pretty new for me. I'm usually a proponent of only having one route on a single workflow step. But in this case, we want to be able to move pretty fluidly between checklist items, right? So if I've got different sections and different areas that I'm auditing at different times, I want to be able to move between them, even though I might not be finished with one. So I could go to section 4, then to 7, then to 6. I just kind of work around it however I want to before reviewing it and closing it out. So again, this is this checklist that I built is for ISO 17025, and I haven't built all of it. And the key, I need to have some disclaimers here. The key reason I haven't built the whole thing is that obviously, one, we're not resellers of the standard. So this is all proprietary information, and I can't obviously provide this to you as just a thing that I give you. Also, these checklists are also proprietary to the ABs, and they would be pretty upset if I provided a checklist that matched exactly what they do to you. So what I've done is I'm just kind of using some generic ISO 17025 language in here. And I have kind of made up my own checklist, okay? And that's just based off of my experience working with 17025 and some things that they look for. There, don't hold this to be exactly what you need or what you would use, right? You would want yours to be a little bit different than this. So if I'm ready to start, I'm just going to pick section 4, and I'll say, all right, I'm going to work on section 4. It will then route over, and you'll see how I've kind of built this now. We've got individual subforms with an ISO requirement, the text of the requirement in is the descriptor of that field. And then I've got columns for all of my evidence, right? I've got any documents. If I know there's a document that fulfills that, I can pull it from the tree. Otherwise, I can pull it from my computer if I need to. I can type comments in like you would normally in a checklist, just kind of provide, maybe you spoke to somebody and got your evidence that way. And then at the end, your assessment as to whether or not they were in compliance for that one. And then as we go, you'll see them all kind of listed out, right? We've got 412, 413, and we're just having places for people to come in here, attach in the evidence for that requirement, and then proceed on with the next section. Now you're probably, let me add a couple of things here just because I want to show you what it's going to look like in the end. We'll do that one and this one. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, why would you, if you're gonna have all of these requirements, why would you split them off like this into their each individual sections? Two reasons. One, as you guys probably know, some people don't always, if you're doing an internal assessment or an internal check, you may not do the whole standard at once, right? You may break these off into independent audits throughout the year. So you might only want to do sections 4 and 5 and not 6, 7, and 8, right? This way they can just kind of pick through which ones they want to look at any time. The second reason is these workflows are going to be pretty large, right? I think for this 17025 requirement, it's got something like 400 or so requirements in it. So you're building a lot of subforms and having a lot of data in here. Loading all of that every time you want to proceed to the next step would be very cumbersome. So I'm kind of breaking it into chunks and then only loading that once here at the end to review the whole thing. Again, you could build this however you want to. This is just the example that I went with. So we've got a few things selected. Because this is a checklist, I'm not requiring things, right? You might or might not have things filled out here. So we can proceed on to other sections without waiting on it. And you'll see here, like I haven't built section 6 or 7 or 8, so that they're blank down here. But you would get the idea that they just keep on going down through there. Go back to section 5 if I needed to, back to section 4 if I needed to, and keep updating info. Now, what you get at the end, scroll all the way down, is whenever I'm done, or I feel like I'm done with my checklist, I'm going to pull my lead assessor back in here at the end from the parent workflow, right? So after we've compiled everything, pull them back in, review the checklist together, and then close it out. So when I hit complete, I'm done with it. It's going to pull back my lead assessor into that and generate my whole checklist here. So every requirement, all of my findings, everything that I had for each of them. And then when we're finally done, just hit audit checklist complete. Now, I'm also not copying data back from this to the parent, right? I'm keeping the parent separate. It's managing the process. And this is going to manage all of my findings, any opportunities for improvement, any additional data that we might have is going to go here, right? I was just using that as the checklist workflow. And the history, of course, is going to have that in here, right? So here's the one that I launched to Susie. Here's the one that I did, completed version out here that can be reviewed and looked at any point, right? So here's my closed checklist, me as the owner, and all of my data there. That also, not copying the data back on actually will help you a little bit with the size of the overall workflow as well, right? Because we're not having to move all of that data at once. Cool. I do want to show you how I built some of this, right? So that you guys can take a look at it if you need to. Over here in workflow admin, you'll see all of that here. The parent workflow is this checklist. The only thing I changed on it from the normal audit management workflow, if you were wondering, is that I added in that automation step right here. And really, you could imagine with any type of a check you perform, if it's a performance check or a QC check, or safety audits, that kind of stuff, safety inspections, you could do the same setup, have a workflow that manages the overall process, and then launch out what independent process you want to do, right? The automation is pretty simple for how I built it. When we're assigning the checklist, you pick the name, it then routes through the automation. The automation is launched to the owner. And for the demo purposes, I have me as the initiator so that I could see it and show it to you. But you would just leave that as the checklist owner. And then after it's complete, we route back to the assignment of the checklist. When we're finished with all of them, after all of them have been assigned, we're just going to go straight on through to conduct audit via the second route. So I usually only use a single routes leaving workflows, but in this case, it can be pretty helpful to have multiple to allow you to just click on through and assign what you need to there. Cool. So that one's pretty easy. Not a whole lot added there. Oh, so it looks like you had a question, Susie.
Yeah, two things actually. So some people were talking about being able to collaborate with one another, and it looks like the attendees only shows people's names and their organization, but not their email address. So just a little side note here, originally I put in the chat that you could post your email address here if you wanted to share that, but it looks like you can also add it to your own profile. So your name or initials should be in the attendee hub on the right-hand side. And oh goodness, you're way smarter, Tim.
Am
You're
I?
way smarter.
What did I do?
You just showed the personnel. I was going to make them go through attendee hub.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
everyone's names on an email address.
Yeah. So if you're in the user conference site, everybody's name and email is in here in personnel. You should all have access to admin and personnel. Don't go changing people's profiles because that'd be kind of mean. But if you want to find somebody, you can do it through there or just through the personnel page itself. If you don't want to go through admin, the personnel page here will have their name and their email address right there. So if you know who you're looking for, by all means do that. You know, this is a pretty collaborative group, so we'd encourage you guys to chat with each other about it.
Yeah, and the other, so yeah, I'm a dork.
Or yeah,
this
or
is why
if
you're
you
the
would,
smarter person.
yeah. Well, the other thing I would say is if you would prefer an introduction to someone, if you don't feel comfortable just reaching directly out to someone, and you would want us to introduce you, we could do that too. Just contact Susie or I, and we can connect you guys and make that connection for you.
We also had another question about being able to export these workflows and customize them. The answer is absolutely. You can export them and use them for yourself. So you can just go to the workflow administration and any one of those workflows that's over there, you can go to the actions and hit export and get those. So.
Yep, that's a good call out. That's why I do everything for user conference in the user conference site. I want you guys to be able to have access to what I'm doing. So everything I show you is in here and built in here, and you're more than welcome to take it and use it for your own. Like I mentioned, the caveat with the checklist is that it may or may not be accurate to that standard. I didn't do that check. You guys would want to make sure it is. And then of course, that checklist I made up, the info that goes with it, you guys will want to make sure it matches what your AD is looking for, right? So just a couple of ones on that, but either way, that checklist is the one for 17025 that I did that you could repurpose, and the parent is this one that says launch checklist. This audit is untouched. That's just the best in class one. I didn't do anything to it. So if you already have it, you can just leave it alone. The last thing, oh, you have any more questions? Are you good?
Good.
Okay, cool. The last thing I'll show with this, with the checklist, I did want to show how I built those subforms, just in case you were curious. You'll see the design of the workflow over here on the left with that landing page, and then being able to route between each section. And I've just got multiple route buttons to go to the sections that aren't what you're currently in, right? So if you're in 5, I can go to 4, 6, 7, and 8 or complete it. The subforms themselves, and this speaks to how I build workflows as well. I put all of my fields on the first step, which you'll see here, and then I just turn them on or off depending on what step you're on and what you want to see. So you'll see like there's all of my subforms for the individual requirements. And you can imagine as you build this out, that there are going to be a lot if you're doing this for ISO. You'll have a lot of subforms here. Take that for what it is. If you want to go down this road, it didn't take me super long to build this part of it, but you guys all know section 7's the beast, and it will be a big one. So yeah, And again, if you want to see anything else related to that, or kick off some other ideas or just chat through, let us know on that. The fields themselves are pretty easy to build. The hardest or the most consuming part, these are all subforms. So there's 411, is that you of course name it, but then copy in the text from the standard. And I've just used a little bit of HTML to bold that to make it stand out more. But you could do that or not. And then it's just picking what your fields for the checklist are going to be, right? I've got a document field, an external file, a text field, and then that compliance yes, no question. So you would just go through and do that for every single subform that you want. So the same fields used here, just used in different subforms throughout. I will mention too, I've seen this built one other way. I've only ever seen one person try to tackle this as a checklist, and they did it slightly differently. They were using scheduling, kind of like we use with the equipment maintenance, where you pre-fill out information, then launch that to someone. And so they built a checklist workflow that would launch audits, if that makes sense. So it was backwards from what I built. And so the checklist, she would go in or went in one time and she filled out one subform and created hundreds of rows and added all of the requirements into that one subform. And then set up the schedule by which she wanted to do them, launch that out. And so she only had to build it once, but then it would just launch and give her the checklist every time for the audit. So a backwards example of what I just showed you. Yeah, so two ways to kind of tackle the same thing. Cool. All right, so and I hope you guys get from that I'm not trying to intend to show you how to perform an audit, right? The idea here is how can we get creative with the system to get as much as we need done in that electronic format, right? If I'm trying to perform an audit, why do I still want external notes that are on paper, or an external checklist that is on paper that I still have to keep track of and do all of that and then scan in and attach it? If I can at all possible get everybody in here working together, that's just going to help overall with adoption of the system, right? So that's all I'm trying to do, give you maybe some creative ways to think about this, and hopefully just maybe apply it to some other areas. If I'm doing checks, can I automate that check instead of a form, do it here and just manage the process myself? Go ahead.
Question that came up when navigating between the different sections. Do you save changes before navigating away? Seems like you would have to if you're using the route function. So
yeah, exactly. So great question. It depends on one thing, and that's if every individual person has their own worksheet. So if you're using the routes to do this, you'll see that I'm assigning these to one person, but let's say Susie and I were in here together. Then you would want to use the save function all the time, right? Because if we're both in here using the same spreadsheet, that would, well, one, you wouldn't want to do that. I would highly dissuade you from doing that. But if you felt like you wanted to do that, then you would use the save button. If not, if this is just mine, I don't have to use that at all. We'll just route through and you'll just update it as you change sections. The only caveat to that is, let's say you're done for the day and you want to leave what we've done and you're not going anywhere else, you would want to save and then leave back to your inbox to make sure that all saved appropriately.
Another question, Tim. Is there a way to duplicate the custom field subforms so they would all have the same contents, custom fields, for example, reference, comments, compliance, and you'd only have to change the title description? Yeah,
I wish. I had the same thought as I was building each and every one of those. Unfortunately, not on the subform. Well, not on any of them. You'd have to build these each independently. So yeah, it would save you a lot of time, but unfortunately not at this time. Great question though. the cool thing is, and as you guys all know, especially for ISO, they don't update super frequently, right? So when you would spend, you know, a few days getting all of these built, but then it's good for quite a few years, right? And then once if it does update, assuming they don't do it like they just did for this last one and completely rewrite it, you should be able to just kind of go in and update fields or add in new ones as needed. So it's a lot of initial front work, but once you have it, it should last you for a little while. Cool. All right, so keeping that kind of creative use in mind, I do want to transition a little bit into some other areas. We're going to talk a little bit more broadly and talk about just user adoption in general now, right? How do we get either workflows or tests and trainings in a place where they're more easy to deal with, right? If I'm a user who doesn't interact with these areas much, how do I make it easier for them to find what they need, get what they need, and move on? And one of the main ways, and a way that I've been kind of advocating for as long as I could, is just using some real basic HTML. And you saw it in that workflow I just built for that checklist, where I'm just using a few things to delineate out. But just using a few tags can really go a long way to make your workflows more usable and your tests and trainings more usable as well. So if you want to follow along, or if you want to see these, there are two places I'm going to be working. In the document tree, down here in my Tim's Creative Qualtrax folder at the very bottom, you'll see a PDF for some common HTML. And this is what I'm mostly going to be talking about. And then as we go through it, we'll be in workflows and in testing and training here in a second. But everything that I am going to talk about, there is an example of, and things that you could just take and use on your own in here. So first thing I'll mention, and you guys are probably well aware of this if you've been with Qualtrax for a little bit, we've been doing a lot of security updates to the platform that have removed some of the HTML ability out of the product. If you want the most recent updated list of what you can and can't do, the support side is the place to go. It's on there. In the support article section, you'll see a full listing of what HTML tags are allowed after all of that security work was done and where you can put them, okay? And what I'm going to show you are all things that are post-security work allowed and things that you guys can keep doing, okay? All of these examples as well, there's in the workflow section, there's an HTML examples workflow, and all of them are in that workflow if you want to see them in person as well, just as a caveat. Okay, so we're going to start with very simple things that you can do. And these are all just, they're super simple, and I've listed them out here with what you need to do them. And these first two are the ones that I've been using quite a bit of lately, and I can't highlight for some reason. But the first one is just a horizontal line break, and I usually put that in conjunction with a section header. And the point of this, I'm going to open this in a new tab, is to just break up the content of the workflow so that the person knows either what's already filled out or what they're responsible for. So in that audit checklist workflow I just showed you, let me go to section 4 and you'll see this. All right, so here's the header that the workflow itself, this is the step name, it places a header at the beginning of the page for you to tell you what step you're on. But right here, I've added with a horizontal break and another header, a break in the page so that we now know what I'm working on next. This is very, very easy to do. In fact, I'll just show you it with the text. You just add in H1 to add that header, close it at the end, and then the horizontal line break, I put that right in front to place the line above the that header tag. So on the custom field side, what that looks like is right here. section 4 general requirements, right? So there's that horizontal break, and then the header tag, the text that I want to be at the header, and then close it out, right? Real simple, nothing crazy, but it just gives a nice visual break into the workflow for what I want. And what I do a lot of times, especially if it's a simple workflow that's for people that don't use workflows a lot, is I'll just put like a header that says previously filled out information and then items to complete, right? That way they clearly know, all right, here's the info that I need. Here's what I have to do as part of this workflow. And you could even put in text as the description right here to tell them, fill out this section. If you have questions, do whatever, right? It's all about just helping them to understand what they're looking at when they get here. Now that I've shown you that one, let me go over to this HTML examples workflow. It's right here in that workflow list. You'll see that same header horizontal row right there, right? Line break, and now we're getting into the difficult stuff. So very simple to do any of that there. You'll see the next two in that page right here, highlighting and underlining. Especially if you're using very large workflows, something as simple as highlighting the field or some helpful text to draw their attention to it can be very helpful in them understanding where they need to go to next, right? So that tag is about as easy as they get. It's just right here. Just put that mark tag around the text that you want to see. Just make sure you close these. That's what that slash is for. It's telling the system where that ends. If you don't put that, you'll just highlight the whole page after that. So just make sure you close them off after what you need. Your underline is here. It's a U, italicizing right there. And you'll see, I kind of wrote this in there. I italicize all of my description fields. And that's, let me go back here, right here. So anytime I add a description underneath the name of a field, it just separates it out a little bit from everything else that goes along with that field, right? If I've got text in here and we move this along to the next step, all of this is going to get jumbled together, right? It's all text that's just all right there in the same spot. So if I can do anything to just set that apart, to know that that's text, not part of the answer, then that's great. You could even just underline it, right? That way you've got a clear break, a visual break underneath that to make sure that everybody knows. So yeah, pretty simple addition to that just to make it happen. The last one is one that you've already probably been using a bunch already. It's this embed image tag. We use it all the time for the best in class workflows that you've seen. And that's how we get the workflow image in the bottom here, right? So we can take that same tag and place it anywhere else in the workflow or within testing and training. It's very simple. If I go back here, it's just image source equals the URL of the image. Super easy. The only caveat is with those security improvements, whatever you're embedding has to be inside Qualtrax. Okay. This is one of the enhancements that we had to do to make sure that your systems were more secure. So if you want to put an image into the Qualtrax system, you first have to drop it into Qualtrax somewhere. So like this image where we've got our HQ, which I wish we were all here meeting, having our fun parties instead of doing this virtually. But next time we'll do that. What I did first is I grabbed the photo, dropped it into my document tree, into an images folder right here. And now that it's in here, I can use that URL to embed it. I did make a few updates. One, we're using the show document link instead of default, right? So that we don't have to worry about that security. And then for properties on the security tab, I added in all visitors. So those two things allow me to then take the image, embed it anywhere that I might want. So you'll see it here in the workflow right there. And you'll also see examples of it if you want to, you can assign yourself this, this test right here. But you'll see examples of it here too. So if I want, for instance, to ask a question and have them answer based on images, you can embed that as that image as the answer. So A is here. I'm asking which diagram is correct for the change management procedure. Is it A or B, right? And so I could say, well, it's B because that's our change management one. Same thing with questions. You can use it in the question itself. And so you could ask, who is that? And you probably are not sure because it's super confusing and Susie loves this photo. But yeah, it's, again, just trying to make your systems or what you've created in your system work for what you want, right? Sometimes it's easier to answer with an image or answer, you know, what is this thing that we do at our plant or our company, and just embed that image right there. All right, so in the document, you'll see those examples listed out here too, if you just want to see them. Go to the custom field area if you want to take a look at how they're made. Keep in mind that when you use HTML tags in a custom field, especially to start it off, they'll be ordered by the tag at the beginning, right? So if I'm like, let's go down to Mark. It's like that one where I highlighted, what's your alphabet, Tim? There we go. Oh, I bet it's right up here. Maybe not. That's weird. Anyway, you get the point. I don't know what I'm looking for anymore. But you get the point. They'll be ordered by the tag name and then followed by whatever it is that you're highlighting there. So yeah, pretty cool. Now, what you're probably thinking is, okay, well, that's all pretty easy, but I've got some more complicated things that I like to do as well. That's cool too. I added a few more harder ones. If you want to see these, hyperlinking to other websites, pretty common ask, especially with either outside of Qualtrax or internal, right? If you want to hyperlink to another document or to a workflow, how can I do that? It's pretty easy. Here's the HTML code for that. You can also use other attributes to change up how that link is going to look. But in general, the outcome is going to look like this. And in the example that I gave, I put the hyperlink in the description right here. So basically, I want them to run a report. I hyperlinked to that report in the description. And then, you know, they could attach, you could have this in an external file and they attach the report in, right? But when you click that, it's going to open up Qualtrax, allow you to run that report, and then you could do whatever you wanted with it and then come back to the workflow. One of the most common scenarios we get for using this is on the testing side. So back in that test, right here, you'll see this section where maybe we would prefer for them to read the track changes version of the document instead of just seeing the final PDF that's linked here. That's easy enough. You just grab the URL to the track changes document, create the hyperlink, and add that code in to the test. So in this scenario, they get here, they've got the final PDF that they can look at, but they're not quite sure what changed. So I can close that out. And here they've got the track changes document that they can open. You know, that just gives them all of the info in one place instead of them having to jump around and try to figure out where in the document tree it is and figure out what changed, right? Just making it that much easier for your end user to do. Yeah, so nothing is out of limit on that one. You can do external websites that way. You can do internal websites that way. The one caveat to this whole thing is that if you're doing an external website, something that isn't in your Qualtrax instance, you will have to use target equals blank on the URL. That's the only way the hyperlink will work and will render. Okay, so if you leave that out to like your company website, it will not load that site. It'll break our security policy. So what I do is just anytime I build one of these, I just go ahead and include it, put the URL in, and it'll just open in a new tab for me. And I don't have to worry about it. The last one, which we also get quite a bit and can be very helpful, is embedding a document inside Qualtrax, or really embedding anything inside Qualtrax, or anything from Qualtrax inside of itself. The caveat to this one is it does have to be, for you to do this, it has to be Qualtrax going inside Qualtrax. You cannot do an external site in this, it just won't render, okay? So anything that you want to embed, put it in Qualtrax first in your document tree, and then you can do it. But once you do, the iframe is right there. This is one that changed. So some of you may have been doing this with embed source in the past. That is no longer allowed. Iframe is the way to go. I went ahead and made you guys a default one down here for you to use. You'll see that I've included the URL right there that you would update. I've also predetermined height, a border, the width of it, the margins around it, all of that is predetermined in the frame. So what you get on the workflow side is right here. If you're in a workflow, you can see the embedded document there for them to view and to look at, and then they could proceed on through with the workflow. And you could see this being especially beneficial if, let's say, going back to our original example, they're doing some type of a check or a procedural check where they have to follow instructions and then input results at the end. You could embed that document here, allow them to use it for all of their instructions and to read and follow along with, and then proceed on through with that workflow as they go. Workflows isn't the only place you can use this though. This is just an example. You'll see it over in this training, this equipment maintenance training, which if you want to see it and it's not in your inbox, just go to your profile and you should be able to assign it to yourself. I think I made it to where you can do that, hopefully. If not, you guys can just go into training and send it out to yourself too. You guys all know how to do that. But in the training, you'll see that we want to train them on a document. I'm just going to embed that right here for them to take a look at, right? Again, not trying to overly complicate anything. We don't want to just do things because they look pretty. I get this question a lot, especially when you relate a document to a training. It shows up as a hyperlink, right? You'll see it right here. And there's no way to enforce that they click that, right? And so they may or may not look at it before they mark it completed. This way, when they load the training, you know they've seen it. It's right here, right in front of their eyes. They can consume it, and it's harder for them to ignore before proceeding on. So yeah, all of it for purpose, right? We don't just want to add complexity for no reason. Go ahead, Susie.
2 questions. So
Yep.
one, can you embed a document into a test?
Yeah, sure. Same way I did it here with the training. I don't think I have it in the example here. I think I left it out for this one. I was just using images, but yeah, you would use that same iframe that I used in the training.
And then also, could I embed an unpublished document?
It's a little bit more complicated. You would have to, that does still have a URL. So let me find one. Let's use this one. So you'll notice, and this is where permissions come into play. You'd have to go to actions and use this open unpublished new revision. And it's that mode equals current hyperlink instead. And the people that you're wanting to give it to would have to have that permission to view unpublished documents for you to do this. So if you use that hyperlink and they have the permission, then yes, you can do the unpublished new version instead.
And this was also added onto that was if they could do unpublished document into a test, and that would be the same, right?
Correct. It would be the same hyperlink. You would want to use the correct hyperlink for what you're wanting to accomplish. The other thing that I do want to mention as far as how this is configured, if we go back to that document, you'll notice in the iframe, oops, that's the wrong one. Give me a sec. Right here. You'll notice in the iframe code, I am using the show document link. And so in order to do the show document link as part of that, in the properties of that document that you're embedding, you would have to have all visitors access to it. So if you're not comfortable with that for security reasons, you would have to edit the iframe. Let me go back. And this is where if you want help with this, let me know, because I've done this and I could just provide it for you, and you wouldn't have to try to figure it out. But you'd have to edit the iframe here to only show the part of the page that includes the document. Otherwise, let me switch this out. Hold on, I got to think where I did this. Let me go to that workflow. I'm going to show you what it looks like if you don't use the show document link, just so that you can have that. Okay, so that text field is let's embed a document. If I use default here instead, what'll happen is it will load the document and the wrapper around it. So it looks like you've got Qualtrax website inside Qualtrax website, and that doesn't look great. So you'll have to edit the iframe to basically only show this section down. And I've done it before. It's not super difficult, but it's something you would want to do before getting to this spot, right? That would maintain your normal security on the document, but you wouldn't have to see the wrapper. Cool. Anything else there, Suze?
Yep. So just got another one. If you are an on-site customer and a user logs in with test training licenses, does it still cause an error when trying to access documents other than one specifically linked in the test or training?
That's a great question. It would depend on that access level, I think. So if you're doing it through testing and training license, of course, the test, if it's linked to the training, or sorry, the document, if it's linked to the training, will automatically grant that person access to view it. If they're using that license and you've embedded the document, the embed doesn't know the connection between the test admin and the document. So in that case, you would have to use the show document link with visitor access turned on. If you do that, you'll have no problems with them being able to view it. If you don't, then yes, it will, what you'll get is an error that says you don't have permission to see this document. Yeah, great question though. Cool. Anything else there? Good for now? Okay. So the last thing, and I know we're coming up pretty close to the end of time here, but I do want to show you one last thing, because we've been talking all about user adoption to the normal product areas, right? We've talked about workflows and trying to use it in creative new ways, or adding in, some slight formatting to just make it easier. We've been talking about test and training, but we do have a new area that you guys can utilize to try to increase adoption overall. And that's going to be this homepage right here. This page, of course, this is probably what you're used to seeing if you've never dealt with this before. It's just pretty generic right now, but we've created the ability for you guys to edit and update this on your own. So if you know some HTML, which I know very little, I'm not a coder, and I've had a lot of fun building custom pages here. When you come here, you can just build whatever HTML page you want, linking to anything within the system, and make this a landing page for all of your users. And I've done that in the document tree. You'll see down here at the bottom, there's a homepage HTML document that I've built. And I'm going to switch under system settings, the homepage to that document. Okay, and we'll just do that. And I'm just going to save it. And now when we go look at that homepage, you'll see we've got a lot more data, a lot more stuff for my users to consume, right? And the real meat of it is going to be up here at the top. What I've done is I've basically created a section where the most commonly used things are, right? It's kind of like your favorites, but without having to dig through favorites, right? In essence, we've just got a quick landing page. They can come here and then it will direct them anywhere else they need to go, right? So if I want to go look at the safety manual, which is probably pretty commonly used, without having to do anything else, I just click there and it opens up my safety manual. Same thing with any workflows, right? I know a lot of times during an assessment, there's a big push and everybody wants to know, how are you gathering feedback? How are you getting improvements and ideas for improvement to your quality systems? Give them a spot right here on the homepage to provide feedback for you. You know, that'll look really good for you, that you're actively out here trying to get feedback back, or allow them to report issues, right? Non-conformances. Just make it easy so that they don't have to know, all right, well, I don't know exactly where I'm going, but let me dig around in workflows, or let me dig around through my procedures and find how I report an issue, right? The idea here is just make it easy, give it to them on their login, and they can just have it right here. Same thing with reporting, right? Access to information for our users is very, very important. So the more that we can empower them and give them information that's happening, you know, whether it's other types of feedback we've received, the audit results, right? If we can just give that to everybody and let them see it, the better off we'll be. So there we've got a link to our audit results for this year. And then of course, you know, things like upcoming events and anything else you want to see here are all on the table. It's just whatever you want to do. And the cool thing is, you know, typically when you log into Qualtrax, you're taken immediately to your inbox. Did we have a question, Susie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you change this homepage to be different for different groups?
Unfortunately not. That would be great. I think that was an idea that we're kind of trying to figure out how to make work right now. Right now, it's just one page for, you know, everybody. What you could do though is make multiple HTML documents, have a landing page that they would like pick what group they're in, and then that would take them to information that is related to their section, right? So one would be the main landing page. The others are just documents that they then interact with like this. And because it's just a document that lives in your document tree, you can interact with it the same. Oops, and I clicked the wrong one. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say I clicked on, I was at that homepage and I said, go to my group. It would then load my groups, and then I could pick whatever else I wanted from here, right? So their interaction would be the same. You just have the one main one for your company. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So another question, could you potentially design the homepage to populate that individual user's most frequently visited items?
Yeah, you'd have to be much more advanced at HTML than me, for sure. You'd probably have to write it in a way that it interacts with, I would think maybe the search with recent items, but I'm not sure. That's a question above my head. We could maybe ideate on that, Susie, and talk with maybe Amanda internally and see if that's a possibility. But in general, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, I can capture that.
Cool.
And then we have another one. Does anyone have a reference on where to teach ourselves how to make a landing page like this if they're new to HTML?
Yeah, I can say where I do, where I learn is, and we are getting pretty close to time. It's w3schools.com. This page is super, or this website is really great. It has this learn HTML. It'll have all of your different sections over here. And then they'll even have try it yourself areas where you can try it out. If you're wanting to just start somewhere, you know, you can take what I have here and play with it and update and do whatever you want with that. Otherwise, just, that's a great place for me. And I'd encourage you to ask others too, if they want to collaborate too. The last thing, and I know we're getting real close to the end, I do want to show you the other thing you can do with system settings is to change that redirect on login to the home page. So instead of them having to click Qualtrax to go find it, when I log in, it'll take me straight to that homepage instead of to my inbox. So making it even easier to just access and get that. So with that, I'm going to pause. I know we're very close to the end of this. And if there's any other questions, that's great. We can take them. Otherwise, we'll call it a session.
We're good.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Great to see you all, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Bye, everyone.